per month. It's easy to give. You can donate online at dec.org.uk or call the 24-hour donation line on 0370 60 60 900. If you prefer to send a cheque, please post it to the Ukraine Humanitarian Appeal, PO Box 999, London, EC 3A 3AA. To give £10 on your mobile, simply text the word crisis to 70150. Standard network charges apply for calls and you must be 16 or over. Texts are charged at the standard network rate and your £10 donation will be added to your bill.
100% of your donation goes directly to the DEC to save lives and deliver critical support where it's needed.
A very good afternoon and welcome to the Briefing PM, an hour of the latest political news, debate and analysis here on GB News. I'm Darren McCaffrey. Here's what's coming up over the next hour on the programme. The Prime Minister faces tough questions on how families will cope with the national insurance rise. We've been out and about hearing from you on how you're managing with the cost of living crisis. Also, the UK and its allies race to catch up with the Kremlin on hypersonic missile technology, which Russia is thought to have used in Ukraine. A former Soviet diplomat joins me, and we'll hear from a war crimes expert. And new analysis suggests nearly 3,000 council officials earned over 100 grand during the pandemic. We'll speak to the Taxpayers Alliance about that. And as always, do get in touch with your views. You can email me at gbviews@gbnews.uk. You can tweet me too at gbnews. That's all between 3 and 4. But first, at the top of the hour, here's the news with Rosie Wright.
Good afternoon, it's just gone 3 o'clock. I'm Rosie Wright, here to keep you up to date. Now, the Prime Minister says the 1.25% rise in national insurance is unquestionably the right thing to do for our country and for the NHS. Well, that increase means Britain's tax burden has now risen to its highest point in 70 years. That's impacting the income of millions of workers. The government predicts £39 billion will be raised over the next 3 years. Boris Johnson says it will help reduce NHS waiting lists.
The most important thing is to have a strong, robust economy in which you have a high level of security in your employment, in which people know that there's a long-term plan to deliver jobs and growth.
The Chancellor's popularity with voters has declined as the cost of living continues to rise. Well, it's a YouGov survey that found Rishi Sunak's net favourability has dropped 24 points in the last fortnight. That's ever since he made the spring statement. Earlier, campaigners dressed up as the Chancellor outside the Treasury office in London, protesting the rise in national insurance. Now to Ukraine, and Boris Johnson says what's happening in Bucha and other revelations from the country doesn't look far short of genocide. It follows calls for more rigid sanctions made by the president of Ukraine as he spoke to the Irish Parliament earlier today. Volodymyr Zelensky says Russia is using hunger as a weapon and is deliberately creating a food crisis.
I'd like to ask you to convince EU partners to introduce even more rigid sanctions against Russia that would really make sure that the Russian war machine will stop. The only thing is that we're lacking is the principal approach of some leaders, political leaders, business leaders, who still think that war and war crimes is not something as horrific as financial losses.
Speaking ahead of a NATO meeting of foreign ministers, Secretary-General Jens Stoltenberg says he believes war crimes have been committed.
We have all seen the atrocities that have been committed in Bucha and other places in Ukraine. This reveals the true nature of President Putin's war. Any targeting and killing of civilians is a war crime, and therefore NATO allies are supporting the international efforts to establish all the facts, to investigate and to make sure that perpetrators are punished.
The governor of Ukraine's Luhansk region says buildings are on fire in the area after Russian shelling. Well, he's urging residents to get out of the eastern region over concerns that Russian troops are preparing for a new offensive in the Donbas area, which includes Luhansk. In the encircled city of Mariupol, the latest British intelligence reveals heavy fighting and continued Russian airstrikes. Most of the 160,000 remaining residents in the city have no light, communication, medicine, heat or water as Russian forces have blocked humanitarian access. The Prime Minister has defended the government's decision to not include trans people in the proposed ban on conversion therapy. Speaking during a visit to a hospital, Boris Johnson said there were complexities and sensitivities which needed to be worked through. He added he was sad at the reaction of LGBT plus groups who pulled out of a planned international conference in protest at the decision. Married couples in England and Wales are now able to legally break up without having to attribute blame for the breakdown of their marriage. In the biggest overhaul of the law in half a century, no-fault divorce legislation comes into force today. Campaigners say that for families who want to break up amicably, it will help them move forward without conflict. Ed Sheeran has called for the end of baseless claims against songwriters. Today, he won a High Court battle in the copyright case against his single, Shape of You. Ed Sheeran's insisted he's always tried to be completely fair in crediting people who contribute to his albums. Posting on social media after the verdict, the singer said, claims like this are too common and they're damaging the industry.
Only so many notes and very few chords used in pop music. Coincidence is bound to happen. Hopefully we can all get back to writing songs rather than having to prove that we can write them.
You're up to date on GB News. I'll bring you more as it happens. Now let's head to Darren for this afternoon's briefing.
Yeah, very good afternoon. Welcome to the programme on this Wednesday. We're on TV, online and on your DAB digital radio. Thank you very much indeed for your company. Now, prices are soaring. Many mortgage repayments are starting to rise as interest rates go up too. And now the government has whacked up national insurance contributions. The hike comes into effect from today. That's despite major grumbling from within the Conservative Party. The Prime Minister, though, was keen to talk about the National Health Service and investment in it rather than tax rises today. He's been out and about with a show of unity with two of the biggest names from his front bench. That's the Health Secretary, as you can see, Sajid Javid there in the middle, and Rishi Sunak, the Chancellor, on the right. He was in a hospital in Hertfordshire as the government announced new funding for diagnostic care. But as ever, Mr Johnson was trailed by a pack of journalists and was asked earlier about how families can make ends meet given the hike in national insurance contributions.
Well, people obviously are going to face choices that they're going to have to make, but we in the government will do everything that we can to help, and that's what we're doing. And the most important thing, there's a couple of things that you can do as government. You can help support people through the investments that we're making, the 22 billion, whether it's supporting people to meet the energy costs, cutting fuel duty, all that kind of thing. But the most important thing is to have a strong, robust economy in which you have a high level of security in your employment, in which people know that there's a long-term plan to deliver jobs and growth. And one of the most remarkable things about the performance of the UK economy since the COVID pandemic began has been the way we've bounced out. People were predicting 14% unemployment around about now. We've actually got unemployment back down to the low levels it was before the pandemic began. Record job vacancies, almost record low youth unemployment.
On energy strategy, now the plan that you're going to put out on Thursday isn't really going to start bringing new types of energy on stream for, in some cases, 2, in the case of nuclear, maybe not 10 years. Will you promise to help people with their bills so long as prices remain high?
Yeah, and we are, and we can see the effects.
For a few months at the moment. And will you promise in the long term to help?
We will do everything we can to help people with the energy price spikes, which, as I say, are a global thing. They're being exacerbated by what Putin is doing in Ukraine. We'll have to see how long that goes on for. But as we did during COVID, we will make sure we look after people to the best of our ability. Now, we've got to be frank with people. There's a limit to the amount of taxpayers' money we can simply push towards trying to deal with global energy price spikes. But what we can do is make sure that we fix some of the long-term problems. And I think it was a great mistake not to invest long-term in nuclear power, and I'll be saying a lot more about that tomorrow. I also think that it's possible to be more urgent in the way that we roll out some of the renewables, and we can go fast. And your point is basically right, Sam. You can't fix this problem overnight, but some of the technologies do allow you to make much faster progress than others, and I'll be talking about that again tomorrow.
There you go. That was the Prime Minister speaking in Durham Hospital a little earlier on today. And we'll get more on the cost of living crisis and that hike in national insurance a little later on in the programme. We'll be joined by Alec Costello about how this is impacting you, the average person, up and down the country. But first, let's turn to Ukraine, because you've heard the Prime Minister there, of course, make reference to the Ukrainian crisis, where Russia's apparent lead over the West in hypersonic missile technology has been put to use. Now, members of this new defence alliance, that's an alliance between the UK, the US and Australia, have now agreed to cooperate on hypersonic weapons and electronic warfare capabilities. Hypersonic missiles are missiles and projectiles which can travel up to 25 times the speed of sound, making them extremely difficult to intercept. Well, let's get more on all of this. Delighted to say I'm joined by the non-proliferation expert and former Soviet government official, Dr. Nikolai Sovok. Thank you very much indeed, Nikolai, for joining us this afternoon. Just first of all, I was just trying to explain there what hypersonic missiles are. They clearly are incredibly fast, 25 times the speed of sound.
Well, not necessarily, actually. Hypersonic is defined as 5 times the speed of sound or more.
Okay, so they could go up to 25 times, but they only need to be 5 times. And
yes,
the reason they're dangerous is because, obviously, with conventional missiles, there is an opportunity for either the opposition on the ground or in the air to intercept those missiles. That's very difficult when they're traveling quite so fast.
Yes, exactly. Yes, and that's the primary actual reason why Russia and China have been developing these missiles. The main actual reason to develop them was to penetrate the missile defense systems that the United States has. And the American missile defense systems are quite capable and really the best in the world. So to penetrate them, you need to fly very, very fast.
And why haven't we, do you know, Nikolai, why haven't we developed these weapons here in the West, or certainly in the UK, Australia and America?
The United States actually looked at hypersonic weapons before, but decided that they were not actually needed. They're quite expensive and quite actually challenging to design and produce, quite expensive too, and really in terms of targets, they're quite similar to subsonic missiles that the United States already has.
Sorry, I was just going to ask you.
Yeah.
You carry on.
I was going to say that on one hand, well, it simply seems, untenable that and the United States does not. And the second actual reason, much more tangible, in fact, is that they're very good at when you talk about Russia, you talk about mobile strategic missiles that you need to hit very, very fast. When you talk about China, you primarily talk about China. So speed for time-sensitive targets is the key.
Indeed. Your sounds, unfortunately, is slightly dipping in and out. But I'm going to ask you one more question before we let you go, Nikolai, and that is that we are now looking at essentially a new arms race. Is that fair to conclude?
Yes, it's fair to conclude. a new arms race. The United get a successful test of a hypersonic missile approximately 2 weeks ago. Yes, and now 3 countries will actually join forces and primarily join funding to complete the development program and to produce them in quantity.
Okay, Dr. Nikolai Sokov, thank you so much indeed for joining us this afternoon here on GBNews, and apologies to viewers. The sound was dipping in and out slightly there, but we got the gist of what Dr. Nikolai had to say. Well, let's move on now, because in the last couple of days, of course, reporters and people on social media have documented what appear to be truly horrific outrages perpetrated on the Ukrainian people by the occupying Russian forces. The investigative group Bellingcat have published drone footage, what appears to show Russian forces firing on cyclists in Bucha. And Ukraine's parliament posted a photo of Sacha, a 6-year-old boy who's said to have been shot dead by Russian soldiers. Elsewhere, early reports from elsewhere suggest that Ukraine could have a worse death toll than we've seen in Bucha. Yesterday, President Zelensky said at the UN Security Council that the Russian forces were committing the worst war crimes seen since the Second World War. Well, join me now is an expert in the law of armed conflict. That is Lee Marler, and he joins us as well. Lee, very good afternoon to you. Just give us a sense, because people will not probably be aware of this, of what constitutes a war crime in terms of the legal standard that needs to be met.
Well, good afternoon, Darren, and many thanks for having me on your show this afternoon. What is a war crime? That's a very good question. Contrary to what President Vladimir Putin and sort of many of his military commanders may think, war is in fact regulated by law. That law is known as international humanitarian law, IHL, or the law of war. And IHL is essentially made up, Darren, of 2 components. The Geneva Conventions, which I'm sure your listeners will have heard of 1949 and 1977, and the Hague Conventions, some of which date back over a century. Now, the Geneva Conventions are rules essentially protecting the victims of war, civilians, the wounded, and the Hague Conventions are rules dealing with the methods and means of warfare, how you go about fighting a war. But, Darren, serious or grave breaches of international humanitarian law amount to war crimes which can be prosecuted under international criminal law. And they include, insofar as civilians are concerned, such things as murder, torture, rape, other inhumane treatment, pillage, wanton destruction, hostage-taking, and forced deportation, and far more. In fact, everything, Darren, that we appear to be seeing in Bucha and elsewhere, such as Mariupol.
Yeah, that was going to be my question. So that was going to be my question, Lee, in a sense of, like, given that and given what you've seen and others have reported, of course, in Bucha, just outside Kyiv, and indeed elsewhere, I mean, are you in little doubt that Russia has committed war crimes?
Personally, from what I've seen on the television, obviously I haven't seen any concrete evidence, but what we've seen, I have complete confidence in saying that the Russian armed forces appear to have committed war crimes in Ukraine, Darren. It certainly seems that way to me, and these things have to be properly investigated now, and the perpetrators of those heinous crimes need to be brought to trial.
We're looking at the moment here, Lee, of some of the aerial footage that's been taken from Bucha, which, many people have pointed to changes in soil composition, suggesting mass graves and elsewhere, but also a sign of the sheer scale of devastation in that part of Ukraine. As ever, though, the problem, isn't it, with these things, Lee, that these war crimes can be called out. Trying to get justice is a hell of a different matter, and that's going to be incredibly difficult while Vladimir Putin remains in the Kremlin.
I mean, you're absolutely right, Darren. I mean, the international justice system, as presently constituted, is ineffective insofar as Russia is concerned, for 2 reasons. First of all, Russia's right of veto in the UN Security Council, and the obvious fact that Russia is not a member of the International Criminal Court. Now, what does that mean? Well, as Russia is not a member of the court, any arrest warrants that are issued by the judges of the International Criminal Court will not be recognised or enforced within Russia. Russia will certainly not extradite its people whilst Putin is in power to The Hague to face trial before the International Criminal Court. And it's highly unlikely that the Russian military justice system, if indeed they even have one, will be utilised to court-martial people sort of suspected or accused of having committed war crimes. So you're right, Darren, provided these soldiers and Putin himself remain comfortably in Russia, and provided that Putin remains in power or someone of a similar nature to him remains in power, then it is unlikely that they will set foot out of Russia, and therefore unlikely that they will be brought before the International Criminal Court, which is exactly what should happen to these miscreants.
Yeah, indeed. And I think we've got some other images from Borodoranka, which is also in Ukraine, where there have been suggestions that even more horrific events may well have taken place than what we've seen in Bucha. Again, viewers at home seeing the utter devastation to that part of Ukraine. And there are many other parts, of course, where the Russians are still occupying, particularly in the east and the southeast of the country, where we know thousands of civilians have already died and fears that figure is only going to rise and rise significantly. Just before we let you go, though, Lee, can we end on a better note, if we can, which is, trying to bring justice for war crimes is a relatively recent thing in terms of the history of humanity. And it is something that does increasingly seem to happen. Most notably, of course, we've seen some pretty big trials in the last decade about what happens in the wars in the former Yugoslavia.
Absolutely, Darren. I mean, I don't want to create the wrong impression. International criminal law does exist. These individuals, including President Putin, need to be brought to book under that international criminal law. Obviously, we have the International Criminal Court. Before that, we've had, Nuremberg, Tokyo, the ad hoc tribunals for Yugoslavia and Rwanda, and people have been brought to justice and have been put behind bars, including civilians. And I sincerely hope that's what happens in this case. In fact, Darren, what you're really looking at here is not just, I shouldn't say just war crimes. I mean, what we're seeing in your clips there raises the spectre of genocide, which is the most severe crime against humanity. I mean, it looks to me, from what I'm seeing, that there's a intentional destruction, at least in part, of a national group, which is the classic definition of genocide. And if you're even accused of such a heinous crime, you need to be brought to justice and you need to be tried on those charges.
OK, Lee, as always, thank you so much indeed. Lee Marler there.
You're more than welcome, Darren.
An expert in the law of armed conflict. Just to bring you up to date, actually, in the last couple of minutes from the Kremlin, from Vladimir Putin himself, saying that Ukrainian authorities are behind crude and cynical provocation in Bucha, again suggesting in many regards that it is the Ukrainians and the West who are exaggerating what has happened in that town outside Kyiv. OK, we're going to take a quick break here on GB News. Coming up in just a couple of minutes, as Britain battles tax and price rises, new analysis suggests some 3,000 consul officials are on more than £100,000, I should say, a year. We'll be talking about that and much more after we bring you up to date with the weather on this Wednesday afternoon.
Hello again, I'm Aidan McGivern from the Met Office. Some bright spells this afternoon, but a lot of cloud about, and showers will continue for many places, with the winds really picking up strength later as an area of low pressure starts to move in from the northwest. And the squeeze on the isobars just to the south of that low will bring gales to Northern Ireland, parts of western Scotland, northwest England and North Wales. So through the evening, the risk of wind gusts of 50, 60 miles an hour for Northern Ireland, parts of the Irish Sea coast, perhaps even 70 for North Wales and northwest England could bring disruption. Meanwhile, a spell of rain in the far south, mild here, but increasingly cold in the far north of Scotland, with the risk of significant snow over the hills of Caithness, Sutherland, the Grampians as well. I think 1 to 4 centimetres above 300 metres. That more persistent rain and hill snow moves south during Thursday morning, breaks up into showers, and during Thursday the winds moderate, but it stays windy, that wind coming from a cold direction, so it'll feel pretty raw in the wind. There'll be some bright weather in the far south, but elsewhere it's a mixture of sunny spells and also further showers. Rain and hail at lower levels, snow over the hills of North Wales, Northern England and Scotland. The showers tend to ease during Thursday evening, and with the winds falling a bit lighter, we're going to see widespread frost, particularly across central parts. So for southern Scotland, Northern Ireland, Northern England, North Wales, temperatures dipping below freezing away from main urban centres. But in the far south of England, here, cloudier skies and some outbreaks of mainly light rain just skirt along the south coast. The heavier rain mainly staying out in the Channel. Brighter skies elsewhere, plenty of sunshine around actually Friday morning for many, but further wintry showers will affect northern Scotland, and then another frosty start to Saturday, but actually Saturday looks like a fine and bright day for most.
Europe is in the grip of the most devastating humanitarian crisis since World War II.
The people of Ukraine are facing unimaginable suffering
as their homes are destroyed and their loved ones are killed.
Millions of people are being forced to flee for their lives, carrying only their children, their pets, and the clothes on their back.
The pain, loss and destruction grows by the day.
The people of Ukraine urgently need our help.
Already a vast humanitarian operation is underway. Britain's Disasters Emergency Committee, or DEC, brings together 15 leading aid charities to respond to overseas disasters quickly and efficiently. These charities include the British Red Cross, CARE, Oxfam, Save the Children and World Vision.
Their teams are working on the ground in Ukraine and neighbouring countries to bring vital aid to those who need it most. If you can spare it, your gift to the DEC's humanitarian appeal will go a really long way.
£10 provides essential hygiene supplies for a person for a month.
£50 provides blankets for 4 families.
£100 provides emergency food for 2 families per month.
It's easy to give. You can donate online at dec.org.uk or call the 24-hour donation line on 0370 60 60 900. If you prefer to send a cheque, please post it to the Ukraine Humanitarian Appeal, PO Box 999, London, EC 3A 3AA. To give £10 on your mobile, simply text the word crisis to 70150. Standard network charges apply for calls and you must be 16 or over. Texts are charged at the standard network rate and your £10 donation will be added to your bill.
100% of your donation goes directly to the DEC to save lives and deliver critical support where it's needed.
GB News is the UK's home of discussion and debate from all perspectives.
To stay up to date on the latest stories,
make sure that you subscribe to the GB News channel on YouTube.
You can watch us live 24/7 across the whole world.
You can also check out exclusive content and catch up on previous episodes of your favourite shows.
Every day, we ask the questions that you'd ask, so why not add your voice to the conversation in the comments section?
Don't forget to subscribe. We are GB News, Britain's news channel.
Hello, I'm Michelle Dewberry and you can join me every weekday 6 till 7 on Jubes and Kerr. Me and my panel will get stuck right into the day's events and I can tell you, in fact, I can warn you, expect some robust debate, some strong opinions and perspectives from both sides of the fence. It's about you at home as well. I love to read out all of your comments, or at least as many as I can. So join me, Michelle Dewberry, Monday to Friday, 6 till 7 on Jubes and Kerr.
Very welcome back to GB News, 28 minutes past 3 o'clock on this Wednesday afternoon. Do get in touch, GBViews at GB News, or indeed tweet us at GB News. We're going to be talking about the cost of living crisis now, because as you've been hearing, there's been a rise in national insurance contributions from today. That is, of course, is in spite of rising prices, particularly with energy costs, and a good deal of opposition from within the Prime Minister's own Conservative Party. Well, our reporter, Ellie Costello, is out and about in Brentwood in Essex. Ellie, what's the mood of the people there in Essex.
Well, Darren, this is a staunchly Conservative area. Brentwood is true blue, but let me tell you, this has not gone down well. Another tax increase. It's not welcome news here. Lots of conversation about whether this is the right way to improve the social care sector, to improve our NHS. Now, of course, this is all coming into effect today, and most people at least are going to see it in their pay slips at the end of this month. But at this time, when the cost of living is hugely increased, especially with those energy bills, this is going to hit many people very hard indeed. Well, I've been out on Brentwood High Street this morning, and this is what people have been telling me.
I think the national insurance rises were inevitable. They've got to pay for all the money they spent out on COVID. Where else are they going to get money for their friends? I mean, all the contracts that have happened with the NHS that have for faulty goods and things like that, billions of pounds disappeared. They've got to make the income somewhere. It's like the household. You've got to balance the books.
Well, there are two ways of looking at it, really. One, that I've been paying national insurance all my working life, over 50 years or more, so you can think, well, I've paid my share. But these are different times, and the young people are struggling, and the NHS needs investment, as long as the money actually goes to what it's supposed to go to.
The country is in a total mess. I don't know who could come in to make it better, but we need change.
So that's what people here in Brentwood think, Darren. And what does this mean for everyday people? Well, for employees, for businesses and for self-employed people, they're going to be paying 1.25 pence in the pound, which doesn't sound like a lot. But when you see that on your wage slip at the end of the month, increased with all these other prices that are going up at the moment, it is going to affect many people. And people here have been talking to me about how concerned they are, especially for young people and for lower earners, about how they're going to afford all of these things happening at once. They're describing it here as a perfect storm. There is this general consensus here that the NHS and social care, it does need reform, it does need drastic improvement, but there is a conversation about whether this is the right tax at the right time.
Ellie, as always, great stuff. Thank you very much indeed. Ellie Costello there joining us from Brentwood in Essex this afternoon. Just coming back to one of our top stories, that is in the last couple of minutes, the US has announced sanctions against Vladimir Putin's two adult daughters and toughened penalties on Russian banks in retaliation for what they've branded war crimes in Ukraine. So the US now sanctioning Vladimir Putin's two adult daughters. We're expecting further announcements from the UK in terms of sanctions later on today as well. Coming up in just a couple of minutes, we're going to be talking about that council waste. Lots of council leaders and officials doing pretty well during the pandemic. But before all of that, here's the news with Rosie Wright.
It's 3:32. Good afternoon. I'm Rosie Wright, here to keep you up to date. The Prime Minister says the 1.25% rise in national insurance is unquestionably right for our country and the NHS. Well, Britain's tax burden has now increased to its highest point in 70 years. The government says £39 billion will be raised over the next 3 years, helping to reduce the NHS backlog. To Ukraine now, and Boris Johnson says the events in Bucha and other similar accounts from Ukraine don't look far short of genocide. It follows Volodymyr Zelensky calling for more rigid sanctions as he spoke to the Irish Parliament. Well, the Ukrainian president says Russia is using hunger as a weapon and is deliberately creating a food crisis. Boris Johnson has defended the government's decision to not include trans people in the proposed ban on conversion therapy. Speaking during a hospital visit, the Prime Minister said there were complexities and sensitivities which needed to be worked through. Ed Sheeran has called for the end of baseless claims against songwriters after winning a High Court battle in the copyright case against his song Shape of You. In a video that he posted on social media, the singer said claims like this are too common and they're damaging the songwriting industry. Sheeran said his Shape of You co-writers denied copying parts of the 2015 song after Chokri claimed the tracks were strikingly similar. You're up to date on GB News. We're on your TV, online and radio. Shortly, we'll be back to Darren for the briefing.
Europe is in the grip of the most devastating humanitarian crisis since World War II.
The people of Ukraine are facing unimaginable suffering
as their homes are destroyed and their loved ones are killed.
Millions of people are being forced to flee for their lives, carrying only their children, their pets, and the clothes on their back.
The pain, loss and destruction grows by the day.
The people of Ukraine urgently need our help.
Already a vast humanitarian operation is underway. Britain's Disasters Emergency Committee, or DEC, brings together 15 leading aid charities to respond to overseas disasters quickly and efficiently. These charities include the British Red Cross, CARE, Oxfam, Save the Children, and World Vision.
Their teams are working on the ground in Ukraine and neighbouring countries to bring vital aid to those who need it most. If you can spare it, your gift to the DEC's humanitarian appeal will go a really long way.
£10 provides essential hygiene supplies for a person for a month.
£50 provides blankets for 4 families.
£100 provides emergency food for 2 families per month.
It's easy to give. You can donate online at dec.org.uk or call the 24-hour donation line on 0370 60 60 900. If you prefer to send a cheque, please post it to the Ukraine Humanitarian Appeal, PO Box 999, London, EC 3A 3AA. To give £10 on your mobile, simply text the word crisis to 70150. Standard network charges apply for calls and you must be 16 or over. Texts are charged at the standard network rate and your £10 donation will be added to your bill.
100% of your donation goes directly to the DEC to save lives and deliver critical support where it's needed.
Very welcome back to GB News. It is 25 minutes to 4 o'clock on this Wednesday afternoon. We're on TV, online and on your radio. Do get in touch, gbviews@gbnews.uk. That's the email address. Or you can tweet us at GB News and we will get to some of your comments a little later on the programme. You may have a thought on this as well, because a recent report from the Taxpayers Alliance has found that the number of officials receiving more than 100 grand a year has reached 2,921. And that was during the COVID pandemic, reaching its highest level since 2013. It comes, of course, as families are now facing a cost of living crisis, including the rise in national insurance today. And the campaign group is calling on local authorities to stop council tax rises and to cut wasteful spending. Notably, of the 10 local authorities with most employees receiving over £100,000, 8 of them were in the capital, London, with the former chief executive of Croydon Council, Joe Negrini, receiving the highest remuneration of any council official at, wait for it, a whopping £613,895. That's right, over 600 grand. And this comes despite the council effectively declaring bankruptcy only in November 2020. Well, join me to discuss all of this from the Taxpayers Alliance is Daniela Boxall. Daniela, thank you very much indeed for joining us. Just on that figure there of the former chief executive of Croydon Council that's been in and out of trouble for quite a few years, quite extraordinary, £613,000. That's about 3 times what the Prime Minister earns. More than that.
Yeah, it's quite shocking, Darren. Thank you for having me on the show. And I think a lot of people will be very disappointed to see that somebody who's basically overseen the council go into bankruptcy being rewarded for failure effectively with such a high remuneration package. And, you know, these people then go on to have jobs elsewhere because they have that experience running councils. And it doesn't seem that that sort of puts other people off hiring them. So, you know, to see somebody who's overseen a council failing to deliver for its residents, to then be remunerated for such a high number, it's quite shocking and galling, really.
It is, but in saying that, councils often employ thousands of people. It's quite a big, important role, isn't it, to a large degree? And people would suggest if you want good people in the public sector, you have to pay them well.
Yeah, and of course, you know, some council bosses are doing very well and they are running their councils well. So maybe they deserve that high salary and a high remuneration. But not all councils are being run very well. You know, lots of people are disappointed with their council's bin collections. You know, these are basic services that councils should be providing. Things like potholes that aren't being filled in. And I think a lot of people will be disappointed that when they think that their council tax is going up, public sector pay is going up for these council bosses, and yet they don't seem the services that they want to have. They don't see that value for money in what the council is providing.
What's the solution to this then? Is it, as you suggested, cutting back on waste? Many councils would say they've spent a decade cutting back on waste and they're now cutting into the bone of the services in the sense that they've gone through austerity and the public have seen their services suffer.
Oh, I don't think that's necessarily the case. I mean, we did an investigation a few years ago and we saw that across the public sector as a whole, not just in councils, but that included councils as well, there was £5.6 billion a year of council waste. I mean, only a few weeks ago, we saw employees from various councils going to the south of France to a conference called MIPIM, which is a property development conference. And they were seen, drinking champagne and sort of smooching with these international property types. And a lot of people might say, is that really, worth my council tax being spent on council employees going abroad and enjoying basically a jolly? So I think there is still a lot of areas that waste could be cut, but I don't think it's necessarily the truth that all councils have cut to the bone. There's multiple examples of waste that we reveal every day, so it's definitely not the case that councils are cut to the bone.
Okay, and very finally, Daniela, we've got, of course, council elections in many parts of the country coming up next month. Campaign is well underway. Can you give it any insight? Is there one particular party or one part of the country where pay seems out of kilter with elsewhere?
Well, I think it's a widespread thing. We see it in councils up and down the country. I mean, this is a full survey of all councils across the UK. So people can go and look for themselves. Obviously, council bosses that we're talking about here, council executives, they're not up for election. So I think it's important that we reveal these salaries, because these people aren't, they're not elected. They're just in the position, and they're the people that actually spend council's money, not the councillors themselves. They get to vote on various things that they want to see implemented, but the people doing the implementation are these council executives that we're talking about in this release. So yeah, it's up to people to look at the release, see if they think their council is doing a good job, and whether these people should be getting the remuneration that they're receiving.
Okay, really interesting stuff. As always, Daniela Boxall from the Taxpayers Alliance. Thank you so much indeed for joining us this afternoon. Lots of you pretty animated about all of this, perhaps unsurprisingly. Beginning in touch, GBViews at GBNews.uk or tweeting us. Ian says, if you think that a council official on 100 grand is an excessive salary, consider this: the managing director of our local council is on £136,000 and she's not the most expensive one in Wales. Robert's pretty scathing too. He said, so glad you're addressing council expenditure. I've always wanted someone to take councils to task and make them accountable. Please take this further and in depth. Well, we've just done that. A more arrogant and ignorant bunch I've yet to meet. Not terribly happy there. And Elizabeth says council workers earning in excess of £100,000 with corresponding pensions, no doubt funded by our increasing council tax. As I say, do get in touch. GBViews at gbnews.uk. And you can talk about that or indeed anything else we're talking about today, not least of all the cost of living crisis, which we'll turn to a little later on in the programme, the big political issue today. But let's move on to another really interesting change that's come about today in law, and that is around the marriage and changes about who is culpable, because around half of marriages do end up in divorce. But up until today, getting divorced has essentially meant you had to assign blame to one party or another, being separated for up to 5 years first. But now in England and Wales only, no fault divorce is possible, with the biggest change to divorce laws in 50 years. So essentially you can say, well, frankly, it's not their fault and it's not my fault. We'd just like to break up. Joining me now is Rita Gupta. She is the co-founder and director of her legal firm. Thank you so much indeed for joining us this afternoon. This is a really significant change, isn't it? And it's one that campaigners have been calling for quite a long time.
Absolutely, it is the biggest change in divorce laws, as you stated, for 50 years. And it's something that as family lawyers, we've thought is really important to happen. The divorce laws are archaic, and they are based on a set of rules that are 50 years old. The society's approach to divorce has changed considerably. And what these new laws seek to do is modernise the terminology and essentially try and remove the acrimony from the outset, or some of the acrimony from the outset, by removing this concept of blame, a fault, and having to provide details as to why the marriage broke down.
And why has it been, do you know, historically, that we couldn't just accept that two people wanted to go off and lead different lives, that essentially if you wanted a divorce, someone had to be at fault?
It's a very difficult one. There's been lots of times when family law organisations have wanted to make this change happen, but there's always been the difficulty of balancing the parties' autonomy and wish to separate with upholding the sanctity of marriage. And listening to a lot of the media press releases today, there is a concern that these laws have made the process too easy and that there will be a huge increase in the divorce rates as a result of that. So upholding the sanctity of marriage has been an issue that people have had to deal with we've had to grapple with. But in no way are these changes meant to undermine the sanctity of marriage or encourage people to go out and get a quickie divorce. In fact, this is not an online quickie divorce process.
Is the time, because I was talking there about 5 years, wasn't I? Is that going to change in terms of like the kind of separated status?
So at the moment, there is now just one ground for divorce, which is that the marriage is irretrievably broken down, and you'll make a statement to that effect. Somebody can make that on their own, or it can be done jointly with the other party. The timeframes now are a minimum 6-month period, and built into that is 20 weeks of reflection time. So if parties want to consider a reconciliation, they can do. Similarly, parties can use that time to work on their financial settlement or make arrangements for their children. You still have to be married for 12 months before you can issue a divorce application. So, as I said, it's not a quickie online divorce.
And just very finally, you touched upon divorce rates there, suggesting you don't think they're going to skyrocket on the back of all of this. But in many ways, it will make divorce potentially easier or certainly more comfortable for lots of people, won't it? Who frankly remain good friends even after they've broken up and have never wanted to get involved in an acrimonious battle, in the sense that the current divorce laws almost prompt an acrimonious divorce if you have to blame someone.
I think that there will be a short-term spike because there have been people who are waiting for this change in the law. So, those people are going to now issue their application. Do I think that this change is going to make lots of people rush out to go and get divorced? No, I don't. I think, the wider ramifications of divorce, like reaching a financial settlement and child arrangements, they are unchanged. And everybody should consider things very carefully before they want to issue a divorce application. I don't think it's going to lead to this huge increase in the divorce rate, no.
Really, really fascinating stuff, Rita. Thank you so much indeed for joining us. That's Rita Gupta there joining us from Reading this afternoon on that significant change to divorce regulations in England and Wales, though Scotland and I think Northern Ireland are looking at similar measures. OK, let's return now to our top story, and that, of course, is the rising national insurance tax hike today, coupled, of course, with soaring energy and food prices. We heard from the Labour Party saying it was the wrong tax at the wrong time, also insisting that we're the only country in the G7 increasing taxes at a time in which inflation is expected to hit around 8% in this country, according to the Bank of England. These questions were put earlier on today here on GB News to the Health Secretary, Sajid Javid, and here's what he had to say.
The timing on this, who wants to see a tax rise when it can be avoided? But I think the reality here is that we all know that the pandemic has had a huge impact on NHS and social care. That impact is going to last for many years. And the NHS and social care needs support to get through it. Part of the way it does it is through new money, but it can't just all be about money. It's also about reform and greater efficiencies, better leadership as well. But the money part is important, especially when you have an NHS that is free at the point of use, paid out of general taxation. This new levy will contribute towards, every penny of it will contribute towards £39 billion of additional funding over the next 3 years. That will give the NHS the biggest catch-up fund in its history to crack through that COVID backlog. And it will mean, for example, the NHS can operate at 130% of normal levels of activity. It can get through some 9 million more scans and tests and procedures over that 3 years. And then also some of that money, over 5 billion, will go towards adult social care, meaning more people will get the means-tested support, millions more people, and everyone will be protected from the catastrophic costs of care. We've had the pandemic. The pandemic has meant, because of the support the government provided, rightly to families, to individuals, to businesses, it meant an additional £400 billion of borrowing. That's money that's going to have to be paid back over the coming years. And it is not, economically, it is not sensible just to continue borrowing and borrowing. We're still running a deficit, so if it wasn't the levy, it would mean more borrowing, and that would mean that the public finance, the economy overall, would be at risk at a time when the economy is creating record jobs. And that is, by the way, I think the best way to help people out of poverty and difficult circumstances is to have an economy that's growing, that's creating jobs with record low unemployment. I mean, of course, the alternative way is if we didn't tax and went for that borrowing, it's also morally wrong as well, because it would mean that we would be asking our children and our grandchildren to pay for our health care and our care costs in old age. I mean, how can that possibly be right?
So that was the Health Secretary, Sajid Javid, speaking a little later on today about the cost of living crisis. OK, let's move on and let's end kind of back on Ukraine again, but also on what's happening in Eastern Europe, because the Hungarian leader, Viktor Orban, led his party to a fourth consecutive landslide victory on Sunday. This is despite reservations, of course, elsewhere in Europe, most notably in Brussels, who accuse Hungary under Mr. Orban's leadership of drifting towards authoritarianism. Some even say towards a type of illiberalism that we've seen in Russia under Vladimir Putin. What the victory has done, though, is prompted to a large degree a split in Eastern Europe's alliance, the Visegrad Group, which is Poland, Hungary, Slovakia and the Czech Republic. The others taking a much harsher line on the issue of Ukraine. We believe that Mr. Orban spoke to Vladimir Putin today, his foreign minister even suggesting that he will break away from Europe's alliance and pay for energy in Russian rubles, which Vladimir Putin has been calling for. So what is the situation in Eastern Europe? Well, delighted to say, joining me now from the European Parliament in Strasbourg is a Czech MEP, Tomáš Jadovský. He is with the centre-right group in the European Parliament. Tomáš, thank you so much indeed for joining us. Just first of all, many people in that parliament there in Strasbourg will have been very disappointed by the results at the weekend. But frankly, it was a democratic vote, wasn't it, to re-elect Viktor Orban. He's clearly popular with the Hungarian people, having won 4 consecutive terms.
Yes, it's absolutely true. I saw many of my colleagues had headache from these democratic elections, but we have to respect. I was with Viktor Orban for many years, very good friend. But we lost his friendships because he is now very clear linked with Russia, and our position as Czech Republic and as the Poland is much more to support Ukraine. And you saw in the media yesterday that the Czech Republic was first country who decided to send openly the military equipment, including tanks, to the Ukraine and to support the Ukraine army to fight any aggressions. Both countries, Czech Republic and Hungary, has the same experience with Russians came, they were aggressors, and they killed many people in our country. In Hungary, it was in 50s, and in the Czech Republic or Czechoslovakia, it was in 60s. And Russian stays in the Czechoslovakia for 21 years. And with this experience, I was very surprised how Viktor Orban is behaved. Also, this is what we are looking for as any problematic things for our cooperation in V4 and in the European Union for the future.
So is there now a massive split in that Visegrad group, essentially that Poland, the Czech Republic and Slovakia are on one side, and as you say, that Viktor Orban is now on the other, that he is someone who's getting cheap oil and gas from Russia and is Putin's friend inside the EU?
Yeah, this is what I said before. It's our experience. I especially come from the soldier family, and in our history was every time's discussion about that the Czechs didn't fire first the German, then the Russian. And I think that we have to recognize the situation. How is it? And yes, Visegrad Group is split. Now is the Czech Republic and Poland really very strong alliance to support Ukraine and supported Ukraine refugees. Included the Slovakia. We have it very close connection and cooperation. We sent it there now the soldier to Slovakia to help Slovakian really to improve the security near the borders. But the Hungary behavior is a little bit others. Also, I will not speak about splitting the Visegrad Group, but about isolating a little bit Hungary. And I am absolutely sure that it will be very problematic for the future cooperation if Viktor Orban don't change his position.
Fascinating stuff and big geopolitical events there in Eastern Europe. Tomasz Jadowski from the European Parliament in Strasbourg, thank you so much indeed for joining us here on GB News this afternoon. Czech Republic, the first NATO country essentially to send tanks into Ukraine. Also suggestions that the Czechs and the Slovaks
Thank you. It was my pleasure.
Military installations to help repair some of the Ukrainian military equipment that's being damaged in that war. OK, that is it from me for today. We're back again tomorrow at 3. We're looking ahead to the French presidential elections this weekend, looking at a tight race between Marine Le Pen and Emmanuel Macron. But before all of that, we've got Colin Brazier, who's on between 4 and 6. That's after the weather. I'll see you tomorrow.
Hello again, I'm Aidan McGivern from the Met Office. Some bright spells this afternoon, but a lot of cloud about and showers will continue for many places, with the winds really picking up strength later as an area of low pressure starts to move in from the northwest, and the squeeze on the isobars just to the south of that low will bring gales to Northern Ireland, parts of Western Scotland, Northwest England and North Wales. So through the evening, the risk of wind gusts of 50, 60 miles an hour for Northern Ireland, parts of the Irish Sea coast, perhaps even 70 for North Wales and North West England could bring disruption. Meanwhile, a spell of rain in the far south, mild here, but increasingly cold in the far north of Scotland, with the risk of significant snow over the hills of Caithness, Sutherland, the Grampians as well. I think 1 to 4 centimetres above 300 metres. That more persistent rain and hill snow moves south during Thursday morning, breaks up into showers, and during Thursday the winds moderate, but it stays windy, that wind coming from a cold direction, so it'll feel pretty raw in the wind. There'll be some bright weather in the far south, but elsewhere it's a mixture of sunny spells and also further showers. Rain and hail at lower levels, snow over the hills of North Wales, Northern England and Scotland. The showers tend to ease during Thursday evening, and with the winds falling a bit lighter, we're going to see widespread frost, particularly across central parts. So for southern Scotland, Northern Ireland, Northern England, North Wales, temperatures dipping below freezing away from main urban centres. But in the far south of England, here, cloudier skies and some outbreaks of mainly light rain just skirt along the south coast. The heavier rain mainly staying out in the Channel. Brighter skies elsewhere, plenty of sunshine around actually Friday morning for many, but further wintry showers will affect northern Scotland, and then another frosty start to Saturday, but actually Saturday looks like a fine and bright day for most.
Europe is in the grip of the most devastating humanitarian crisis since World War II.
The people of Ukraine are facing unimaginable suffering
as their homes are destroyed and their loved ones are killed.
Millions of people are being forced to flee for their lives, carrying only their children, their pets, and the clothes on their back.
The pain, loss, and destruction grows by the day.
The people of Ukraine urgently need our help.
Already a vast humanitarian operation is underway. Britain's Disasters Emergency Committee, or DEC, brings together 15 leading aid charities to respond to overseas disasters quickly and efficiently. These charities include the British Red Cross, CARE, Oxfam, Save the Children, and World Vision.
Their teams are working on the ground in Ukraine and neighbouring countries to bring vital aid to those who need it most. If you can spare it, your gift to the DEC's humanitarian appeal will go a really long way.
£10 provides essential hygiene supplies for a person for a month.
£50 provides blankets for 4 families.
£100 provides emergency food for 2 families per month.
It's easy to give. You can donate online at dec.org.uk or call the 24-hour donation line on 0370 60 60 900. If you prefer to send a cheque, please post it to the Ukraine Humanitarian Appeal, PO Box 999, London EC 3A 3AA. To give £10 on your mobile, simply text